Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Helen, and thanks to each one here for joining this Saturday sit at MKZC. Our Zoom gathering brings home the reality of no near or no far. The reality we taste in the spaciousness of sitting, the one boundlessness we invoke and express in our chanting of boundless compassion. Just compassion. Your whole body, all embracing. If MKZC has a soundtrack, it is this chant. Moment by moment, the true heart arises. Your true heart, right here, right now. For the past few months, another verse has been coming up hand in hand, a constant current in this practice. Like our boundless compassion chant, it's an instruction, a guide, an imperative, and at the same time, an expression of reality, just as it is. This is the last stanza of the poem Song of the Grass Hut by the 8th century Chinese master Shitu, or Sekito in Japanese. Here's that stanza. Let go of hundreds of years and relax completely. Open your hands and walk innocent. Thousands of words, myriad interpretations are only to free you from obstructions. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from this skin bag, here and now. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Last Saturday, Maria gave a beautiful and evocative talk about no separation. She shared an experience she had years ago at Great Bow Monastery in Oregon, where Jan Chosen Bays is co-abbot. As it happened, a few days later, a friend who did a residency at Great Bow this past winter sent a link to a Dharma talk by Jan Chosen Bays. It was her final teisho of their March session, this past March, which was shifted at the last minute to a sequestered session, residents only, with registered attendees asked to stay home, stay safe, and connect virtually. The pandemic had just arrived on the scene in a way that changed everything. Chosen Bays began her talk by noting they were in a bardo practice period at the monastery. Bardo is a Tibetan term for the transition between life and death, but it can also refer to any transition. She said, we walk through the door into the unknown, breath by breath, moment after moment. The next moment is completely unknown. Jan Chosen was a medical doctor in her professional life. From that perspective, I took it. She said, denial about death is a mercy. We don't want to live a life of constant panic, facing the unknown. She mentions the refugees from Syria. Don't want to be so anxious we wash our hands until they are raw. All, she said, linked to the fear, to our fear of death. And then she said, once in a while, the curtain that screens us from the ever-present reality of death parts. The current COVID pandemic has parted that screen temporarily for us. This is a gift. That was early March. Here we are on September 12th, 2020. Can we say this is a gift when this includes the pandemic 6 months in and the gaping disparities it's laid bare? When this includes the racial injustice, the protests and violence, social and political divisions at home and around the globe, the raging wildfires in California, Oregon, Washington, that residents are calling apocalyptic, the burgeoning climate crisis, the strung out anxiety and insecurity of daily life for so many, the heightened time for practice. This is a gift. What if the gift is not only being brought face to face with our own mortality, not only parting the screen temporarily, not only dropping the artifice of control? What if the gift is allowing our hearts to break? And maybe in an unguarded moment, to break all the way open, all the way open. One boundlessness. Today, as a way of pointing to the boundless heart, your heart, I'd like to look at a koan that comes early on in the miscellaneous koans. This is from the Sambo Zen collection that students take up after having an initial opening experience. It's one line, one I've been sitting with, especially as the wildfires become more and more deadly. Here it is. Put out the fire 1,000 miles away. What we wouldn't give to put out the fire. Fires of all kinds. If only we could take the weather system that's been lavishing rain on Texas and Florida and move it west. If only we could galvanize authoritarian regimes to release prisoners, to release the protesters. If only we could bring peace to our country and peace to our hearts. This koan isn't about if only. It's about the real world. The really real world. And about this practice. What Dogen calls practice realization. One word. Not even a space for a hyphen. This practice. Put out the fire 1,000 miles away. Practicing with this is not about logic. The invitation is to be the koan, or to become very still and let the koan resound, to let it fall on you, to let it consume you. Put out the fire 1,000 miles away. It's possible to parse this line or turn it like a gem and see three aspects: put out or extinguish. A fire burning, maybe raging, maybe illumining, and distance. 3 in 1. Put out the fire calls to mind the 8 worldly winds in Buddhism's lexicon of human experience: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. The sum of desires and aversions that bind us and toss us about. They all hinge on the construct of I, me, mine. I want, I don't want. I have, I lack. Good, bad, success, failure. Just to name them can create or bring to light a constriction in the body. That's worth noticing. Sitting with this sensation, allowing it some space. Just allowing. This practice is a solvent. Posture, breathing, stilling the mind. Years ago, I first met Father Robert Kennedy at a weekend session that Helen organized and KZC hosted. And he said this line: Zen is a solvent. It struck a chord. And then there's the instruction that Joan Reek gave when she came to Dallas in the 2 years that Ruben and Maria, the boys, were in Japan. And she led sesshin for us. And that very first session, she gave this instruction: drop all desire. The only desire you're allowed to keep, she said, is the desire to drop all desire. Momon sat earnestly, single-mindedly with Mu for 6 years. When it broke open like a thunderclap in a clear blue sky, he wrote. To pass through this barrier, this gateless gate, this is Momon, you must completely extinguish all thoughts. Gateless gate. Dissolve, drop, extinguish. That's the practice. It's also what Bodhidharma called the principle, the fact, we come home to in this practice, the reality of who you truly are from the beginning, thoroughly extinguished. This summer, Helen gave a talk where she mentioned the death of her sister from cancer. I think it might have been in 2004. Sorry if that's not exact. Helen had made all the preparations for a residential 7-day session, 7 days. But just before the session started, her sister's health worsened and Helen left to be with her. We missed Helen. And we were mindful of the situation daily. It was a large session in a new place. Many participants there pitched in to help. I was asked to monitor. Strangely, had never done that for 7 days. By the second full day, we'd settled into the schedule and things seemed to be running smoothly. Sort of breathe into it. This is going to happen. I remember going back to the Zendo that day for afternoon sitting, walking along a path in the woods between buildings. The sense of peace, of a clearing. In that absorption, I flashed on monitoring, and the thought came, there's still someone ringing the bell. Then came this plea, like a prayer rising up. Let me disappear. And then, if it is your will. Immediately, I heard a response in the silence. It is the will of God that you disappear. Disappeared. Extinguished. It is so. An experience unfolded in that grace that I can only call love. Everything, everything, just suffused, suffusing love and freedom. The reality of who I truly am does not depend on what I think. Empty, infinite, boundless. It is so. Put out the fire 1,000 miles away. What about that distance? Throughout the summer, protests against the authoritarian government in Belarus have been growing, building daily. Since the election there on August 9th, by many accounts bogus, the result, the putative winner had to leave the country under threat of death. And a number of opposition leaders have been arrested. They've heard cries in the night outside the holding place. One of those leaders Maria Kaliniskava returned to Belarus recently after living in Stuttgart in Germany for 12 years. She's a gifted musician and art curator, but just felt compelled to go home to join this movement. A few nights ago, Maria was abducted, snatched into a van by masked men, men in black. The next night, she did appear in a car being driven to the border with Ukraine. And the camera showed the car there, border crossing. They were trying to deport her, to force her into exile. But instead, I just learned she tore up her passport. So refused to leave. And now she's in prison in Minsk, Belarus. It turns out that Maria Kaliniskava is a good friend of a Zen student in Germany, a very earnest practitioner, recounting the devastating news, this story. The Zen student said, separation is easier. This student has had a deep taste of the indivisible boundlessness of this real world. Separation is easier, is a cry of lament that brought her home to her own broken heart. It took a day or so, but brought her home. A heart broken all the way open, near or far, doesn't hold up. As Sister Elaine McGinnis puts it in her commentary on this koan, distance is no separation. No separation. One boundlessness. Love beyond any name, any thought. How can we see it? Be it. Again, Master Sekito's words from long ago address us now, here and now, exactly in our time. Let go of hundreds of years and relax completely. Open your hands and walk innocent. Thousands of words, myriad interpretations are only to free you from obstructions. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, that one, don't separate from this skin bag, here and now. Time after time, there is nothing but this.